They say life surprises you when you least expect it, but I never imagined mine would unravel at the exact moment it was supposed to be celebrated. The retirement bash was packed. Streamers, catered hors d'oeuvres, fake toasts. My name, Marcus Wren, echoed in every corner of that Chicago event hall. I had just stepped down after 33 years as CFO of Kenwood Systems, a manufacturing powerhouse rooted deep in the South Side, a concrete fortress of industry and labor. While most execs were out glad-handing clients or swinging golf clubs with board members, I was always buried in ledgers and data trails. Numbers told a story that people often tried to bury, and I listened. I wasn't flashy, but they called me the quiet hawk around the office. Not because I was loud, but because I noticed everything. I could see the economic tremors before the seismologists of Wall Street. I predicted global shipping delays 3 months before they hit the news. When something was off, I smelled it before it hit the balance sheets. I lived by 3 unshakable beliefs. Numbers never mislead, self-control builds legacy, and loyalty isn't a one-way street. And I gave my loyalty without question. To my job, but more than that, to my family. Denise, my wife for nearly 3 decades, was the heart of my home. Golden hair that shimmered in sunlight. A laugh that once made me forget the cold weight of quarterly stress. She was grace and charm, wrapped in warmth. Then there were our children. Tyler, our driven eldest. Polished, hungry for success. Fresh out of Northwestern with his MBA in hand. A fire starter, ready to take on the world. And Camille, the artist of our family. Always sketching clothes in her notebooks, dreaming of fashion lines, boutiques, and design studios nestled in Lincoln Park. I never hesitated for them. Never. Tyler said he needed Northwestern's MBA program to break into the corporate world. I paid the entire tuition without blinking. $43,000 wired in a heartbeat. I wanted him debt-free, free to soar. Camille dreamed of opening a storefront. I handed her a check and helped her lock down a space that screamed high-end dreams. Floor-to-ceiling windows, rustic exposed brick. It was hers. Watching her cry as she held the keys, I thought, this is what being a father means. And Denise, oh, I gave her a life most could only fantasize about. Every 2 years, the keys to a new luxury car. Seats that adjusted themselves to her memory. Interiors that whispered elegance. Her long-dreamed Tuscan adventures? I booked them, first-class, vineyard tours, the finest villas with sunset views. She came home radiant, filled with stories of cobblestone paths and lavender-scented breezes. Our lakefront home wasn't just shelter, it was art. A wraparound deck that let the sun melt into Lake Michigan each night. She'd nestle beside me, a glass of wine in hand, and I'd think, this is it. This is home. I believed they loved me, deeply, truly, that our bond wasn't just built on what I could give, but on who I was. Sunday dinners filled with laughter, Thanksgiving rituals, the same worn-out Christmas movies. We had a rhythm, a life layered with years of love and trust. But numbers don't lie, and I started seeing fractures. It wasn't all at once, just hints at first. Denise started coming home late more frequently. Her reasons? Too polished, like scripts rehearsed in her car. Tyler stopped staying for full weekends. Conversations with him felt like business meetings. Camille's eyes, those bright, expressive eyes, started to look at me like I was a stranger, or worse, a burden. Not sadness exactly, more like silent apology. Calls ended the moment I stepped into a room. Whispered chatter cut short. Credit card transactions that didn't match our usual spending habits. Small things, but I was trained to notice small things. And then came the final blow. Right there at my retirement party, when I was expecting a gold watch or at least some half-decent cake. Denise handed me a manila envelope. She didn't say a word. Didn't need to. I opened it and there it was. Divorce papers. Publicly delivered with cold precision. And the worst part? The kids knew. They stood there, eyes on the ground. Silent. Complicit. I didn't make a scene. I didn't ask why. I just vanished. I left Chicago. Sold the house. Changed numbers. No calls. No emails. I withdrew like smoke after fire. People talked. Maybe they still do. I let them. Some men scream when their world burns. I just disappeared into the ashes. For 4 long years, I was a ghost. No birthdays, no holidays, no surprise visits. They reached out eventually. Tyler sent emails. Camille left voicemails. Denise even wrote a letter once, saying, "It wasn't what it looked like." But it was. Then came the twist. They came to me needing help. Tyler's startup had collapsed under financial scrutiny. Shady investor decisions. Camille's boutique was hemorrhaging money. Rent was overdue. Her partner had bailed, and suppliers had cut ties. And Denise, her new man, turned out to be a fraud in every sense. Took her money, broke her heart, left her hollow. They wanted my help. The numbers guy, the fixer, the quiet hawk. So I showed up, finally, sat across from them in Tyler's living room, and said just one word. No. Their jaws dropped. I told them I'd watched them trade integrity for convenience. I laid out every discrepancy I'd tracked, every charge on Denise's card that didn't match her alibis. I told Camille I knew about the boutique's fake invoices and Tyler about the investment scams masked as tech projects. They had taken from me, then expected me to save them. But the truth was I already had. Before disappearing, I created a trust, a legacy fund, built slowly, silently over the years. Not for them, but for their children. My grandchildren. Untouched, secure, bulletproof from bad decisions. I'd done what I'd always done. Protected the future with discipline and foresight. You don't get another bailout, I told them. But they will. Then I walked out. Sometimes being the quiet one means they forget what you're capable of. They forget that while they were lying and scheming, I was still doing what I do best. Tracking, planning, building something real. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. If there's one thing I learned from decades in corporate finance, it's this: numbers don't deceive. People do. Feelings get muddled, promises get forgotten, and trust gets bent until it snaps. But numbers, they hold up. They lay everything bare, even when the truth burns like acid. Lately, I'd felt a shift. Something was off in the balance sheet of my so-called perfect life, and deep down, I feared I was about to uncover just how far things had unraveled. All I wanted for my retirement celebration was something simple. Nothing grand. Just a backyard get-together with folks who'd meant something to me over the years. Friends like Bill from accounting, who'd shared spreadsheets and bad coffee with me for over a decade and a half. Janet from HR, who remembered everyone's birthdays with a card and a laugh. Some retired coworkers who still checked in now and then. A few neighbors we'd hosted barbecues with during the summers. And of course, my wife and our 2 kids. My whole world. I was genuinely looking forward to what lay ahead. After 30 years of early mornings and high-stress meetings, I'd finally get to breathe. Denise and I had our eye on this gorgeous RV, 36 feet of polished comfort with more bells and whistles than most condos. We'd spent entire weekends at dealerships, with her daydreaming about shelf space for her novels and me obsessing over power systems and tank capacity. The plan was to tour the country, find hidden corners of America most people only read about, maybe cruise along the Pacific Coast Highway, spend slow mornings in salt-swept towns, wave at strangers who had nowhere urgent to be. We'd even talked about a small winter escape in Florida. Just a modest house where we could sip coffee on a screened-in porch instead of shoveling snow in Chicago. That evening, our backyard glowed under a string of lights. Denise had hung herself earlier that day. The weather had done us a favor. Clear skies, no humidity, a gentle breeze coming in off the lake. I wore my favorite navy polo, the one Denise always said made my eyes stand out, and I felt good, light, happy, ready to step out of one life and into the next. The guests were chatting, the drinks were flowing, and Janet had brought a chocolate cake so rich it practically required a permission slip. The words, "Happy Retirement," Marcus, were piped on top in cursive that probably took her an hour. Bill was regaling everyone with tales from our early days, when floppy disks were still a thing, and laughter filled the air. It was exactly what I had pictured. Then I saw Denise walking toward me through the crowd. Her smile was practiced, Picture perfect from afar, but a little too tight up close. I knew that smile. I'd seen it before when she was about to break bad news gently. Like when she blew through a redecorating budget or scratched the car backing out of the garage. She was holding a large manila envelope, and something about the way her hands gripped it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Years of reviewing sensitive financial documents had conditioned me to recognize trouble before it spoke. And this envelope? It was heavy, serious. Not a card or a keepsake, but the kind of weight that meant something life-altering lived inside. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Marcus, this is your retirement present." I took the envelope. Felt thick, too thick. My instincts were already kicking into high gear. My hands didn't shake. After managing multimillion-dollar crises, I knew how to keep my poker face even when the floor cracked under me. I opened the envelope right there, within earshot of friends and family laughing over burgers and cocktails. Divorce papers, neatly typed, precisely worded. Every clause a scalpel to the life we'd built over 28 years. This wasn't a discussion. It wasn't a conversation. It was an execution. Professionally done by a lawyer I didn't recognize. Everything legal. Everything final. I didn't react the way people in movies do. No dramatic gasp, no dropping the papers in slow motion. I stood there, reading them like I would any quarterly report, processing the disaster line by line. But inside I was cracking. I looked up. My son Tyler was near the drinks table, suddenly obsessed with the condensation on his beer bottle. He wouldn't look at me. Camille, our daughter, offered a twisted little smile. Not warm, not sorry. More like someone trying not to laugh at a cruel joke. That's when I saw him. A stranger, loitering just beyond the gate, pretending to belong. He was tall, probably mid-40s, with his hair slicked back like he was starring in his own commercial. His suit screamed status, too sharp, too smug. The type of guy who gets mistaken for a CEO at airport lounges. And the look in his eyes? He wasn't just observing. He was savoring something, like he already knew what came next. Denise stepped closer. I caught the familiar scent of her perfume, the same one I'd wrapped in holiday paper for her 10 Christmases in a row. Her voice dropped, and the next words she said sliced straight through the calm I'd worked so hard to hold on to. They hit me like a wrecking ball. She looked me in the eye and said, "I didn't sign up to care for a retired man." That's when it all clicked into place. My own children, the ones I put through college, the ones I stayed up nights worrying about, the ones I pushed into good schools, good jobs, good futures, had known all along. About the affair. About the divorce. About the way she timed it to humiliate me in front of everyone I'd ever worked with. And not one of them said a word. Everything added up then. All those strange silences. The awkward glances. The cold politeness. Took me only 3 days to decide what I had to do. 3 nights in the guest bedroom. Hearing Denise move through the house like she hadn't detonated our entire marriage during what should have been the happiest chapter of my life. Watching her pour coffee, hum a tune, smile at herself in the mirror like nothing had changed. She was still playing the role of wife, while I was a ghost haunting my own home. So what did I do? I signed the papers. No yelling. No breakdowns. No desperate speeches or pleading or, "Let's try to fix this." I wasn't going to beg someone to stay who had clearly planned their exit months in advance. I walked into that high-end law office, marble floors, walnut panels, the kind of place that makes you feel poor just standing there, and I signed everything. Every last page. The lawyer, a woman in a sleek suit with a no-nonsense vibe and probably a $500 per hour billing rate, kept watching me like she expected something. A fight. A breakdown. Maybe one last-ditch effort to salvage something. But I gave them nothing. No reaction. No bargaining. The lake house? Take it. The place I imagined growing old in. Drinking coffee on the deck and reading novels while the seasons danced across the water. Hers now. The bank accounts that were in plain sight? Sure, divide them equally just like Illinois law says. The retirement savings that any half-competent CFO would have built up over 3 decades. Go ahead, split it down the middle. That's what they expected. That's what they thought they were walking away with. But what they didn't know, what they could never have guessed, is that I'd spent years building something they couldn't touch. It wasn't fraud. It wasn't theft. It wasn't even shady. It was smart. I never did anything illegal, never lied on a form, never skipped a disclosure. I just played the long game. The kind of game you play when you've spent 30 years as a financial executive and you know how money works in the shadows. Offshore accounts, fully disclosed. Trusts set up in names they'd never think to look for, old family names, variations, combinations. Legal, clean, invisible. Over a decade ago, I started planning for the long term. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I understood risk. And good risk management means preparing for every scenario, even the ones you pray never come. While she was busy redecorating and flipping through travel brochures for Europe, I was building a fortress of assets she would never find. Stocks across different firms. LLCs with perfectly valid business purposes. Rental properties tucked into corporate structures that never showed up on our shared taxes. Quiet, protected, untouchable wealth. 15 years of quiet planning. 15 years of diversifying, securing, hiding in plain sight. While Tyler was grinding through business school and Camille was dreaming about opening her boutique, I was laying the foundation of my own escape plan. Not from them, never from them, but from the possibility that one day, all of this might come crashing down. And it did. But they didn't see it coming. They never saw me. To them, I was dependable, predictable, a creature of habit. Dad, husband, the one who paid the bills, nodded politely, and asked how their day went. They thought I'd be lost without my career, that I'd sink into retirement like a deflated balloon, bitter and aimless. Maybe take up gardening or whittle birds out of driftwood to pass the time. They underestimated me. The truth is, I'd already started checking out long before Denise dropped the bomb. I was still clocking in at work, still running the numbers, still making sure Kinwood's books were spotless. But inside I was watching, calculating, preparing. I sensed the shift before the signs became obvious. That's what experience does. It sharpens your instincts. And my instincts had been screaming for a long time. I didn't ignore them. Now, while Denise celebrated her freedom and started plotting a new life, probably with that same smug smirk she wore the day I handed her the signed documents, I was already gone. Not physically, not yet, but financially, emotionally, tactically, I was light years ahead of them. They thought they played me, but I had the board cleared and the next 5 moves lined up before they even picked up a piece. They never saw it coming, not because I hid, but because I transformed. Before the storm hits, there's always that eerie stillness. That calm? That wasn't peace. That was me. Quiet, calculated, inevitable. You want to understand the real difference between stepping away and vanishing? Walking away leaves a trail, a trace, something people can follow if they're determined enough. But vanishing? That's becoming vapor, a shadow, the whisper of a person that once existed. And me? I didn't just walk away from Marcus Wren's life. I obliterated it. Erased it so thoroughly, it might as well have been fiction. The process began with my phone. Not silence, not airplane mode. I walked straight into the Verizon store and shut the whole thing down. My number, 3 decades old, wiped out. The employee behind the desk gave me the kind of look people give someone standing on a ledge. You can freeze your account if it's about money, he offered. No, kid. It wasn't about money. It was about cutting the cord for good. Social media came next. Every trace of my digital footprint, gone. I torched my Facebook, wiped my LinkedIn, dismantled that dusty old Twitter I barely touched. I had albums filled with memories, birthdays, anniversaries, office parties, family milestones. Deleted. It was like running my history through a digital incinerator, watching it all disappear in smoke and data ash. Then came the finances. This part took the most finesse. I'd unknowingly laid the groundwork over the years. I left behind one checking account with enough activity to keep the illusion alive. Everything else? Shifted. Quietly moved into places far from prying eyes and legal reach. On paper, Marcus Wren was worth about 50 grand. The reality? Let's just say the real numbers were stashed in places the IRS would need a decade and a court order to find. When it came time to leave, I didn't take the luxury car, the sleek BMW Denise adored. No, I chose the beat-up old Ford pickup I'd used for weekend repairs and yard work. In went a week's worth of clothes, my laptop, a couple of hardback books, and the only photo I couldn't let go of. Me and my father, holding a tiny sunfish, grinning like fools. The rest of it? Left behind like discarded costume pieces after a bad play. No letters, no messages, just the open road and I, 80 stretching west like a promise. By the time the skyline of Chicago faded in the rearview, it was already behind me in more ways than one. A week later, I was in Oregon, shaking hands with a real estate agent named Linda, who looked like she backpacked to work. She specialized in secluded properties, privacy seekers, off-the-grid types. Ideal. She showed me a modest cabin nestled at the foot of Mount Jefferson. 10 acres of wilderness wrapped in towering evergreens. The house was simple, 2 bedrooms, an outdated kitchen, and a creaky porch, but it was sturdy and, more importantly, invisible. No HOA, no peering neighbors, no rules. Just trees, quiet, and the kind of stillness that city money can't buy, but could rent, in this case, for $1,200 a month. It didn't take long for the calls to start. Not to my phone, of course. That was dead. But they went looking. They called Kinwood's front desk. Janet fielded a dozen of them. They even tracked down my freshman year roommate like I was trying to relive college memories. Tyler's voice came first. Dad, we need to finalize some numbers. Funny how it's Dad when there's a check involved. Denise followed. We should discuss the alimony structure. She never cared about the money when it flowed freely. Now she suddenly wanted spreadsheets. Then Camille, the sharpest of the three. People don't just vanish, Dad. Come on. Her words always carried a sting. But she was wrong. People vanish all the time. The trick is doing it right. That's the magic of Oregon. There's so much emptiness you could hide forever. My nearest neighbor lived 3 miles out. He was a retired ranger who kept to himself and respected those who did the same. That first month? Brutal. Not because I missed them, I didn't, but because silence, true silence, hits harder than expected. No phone ringing. No morning greetings. No inboxes demanding action. Just wind dancing through the trees, the occasional deer crossing the yard, and the echo of your own thoughts bouncing off cabin walls. But I learned. I adjusted. I embraced the silence until it became music. I stopped dreading the stillness and started breathing it in. See, I'd been lonely for years, in a crowded house at a full dinner table, but solitude, that was something else entirely. Solitude was permission. It was liberation. Necessity births invention, but solitude? Solitude fathers reinvention. By the second month, I understood I was finally the architect of my own time. No meetings, no family drama, no expectations, just space, quiet, and a future of my own making. That's when I got to work. I turned that creaky little cabin into a fortress of digital firepower. It became my operations hub, a cockpit for financial dominance. 3 ultra-wide 32-inch monitors mounted with precision, each feeding me real-time data from global markets. The center screen, my primary trading deck. The left, commodity and futures. The right, global indices, Frankfurt, Tokyo, London. Pulling high-speed internet through 10 acres of forest wasn't cheap, but I had the money and no reason to skimp. I paid a crew to run fiber optics through trees and rock. They thought I was nuts. Who needs lightning-fast bandwidth in the middle of nowhere? Me. I did. This wasn't retirement. This was rebirth. No more expectations. No more labels. I was no longer the CFO, the provider, the husband, the father. I was something better, untraceable, unstoppable, untethered. They say you can't just disappear. I say they just never figured out how. They probably thought I was working for some covert government agency. If only they knew I was nothing more than a retired chief financial officer who had turned the quiet solitude of the forest into a command center for mastering the art of smart investing. My spreadsheets weren't just documents. They were elegant, color-coordinated masterpieces, far more intricate than anything I'd handled at Kenwood. I kept tabs on sectors others overlooked, frontier markets, underrated tech ventures with real substance, and crypto initiatives with meaningful use cases, not just noise and speculation. While amateur investors chased social media fads and gambled on viral stock tips, I laid the foundation for a financial empire built on 3 decades of professional discipline and zero emotional bias. The payoff? Within half a year, I was earning more from my secluded woodland home than I ever had in Chicago's polished boardrooms. 2 of my biotech ventures were acquired by pharmaceutical giants. A modest solar company I'd bet on early exploded in value when Tesla adopted their tech. Even my crypto assets, selected based on real-world utility, flourished as casual Bitcoin traders took losses. But money wasn't the most valuable transformation. It was the rebirth of my body and mind that truly defined this chapter. I stopped relying on alarms. My internal clock began to sync naturally with the rising sun. Each dawn, I'd lace up my boots and set off into the forest trails behind my land. Never less than 5 miles, often closer to 10. My desk-bound, stress-eating body began evolving slowly, then all at once. I converted the second bedroom into a bare-bones gym, dumbbells, a pull-up bar, a few resistance tools. Nothing fancy, but I was relentless with consistency, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, I could knock out more push-ups than I managed at 17. My gut vanished. My posture straightened. When I caught my reflection, I no longer saw a tired suit. I saw someone I was proud to be. My evenings became a time of exploration. I registered for online courses from MIT and Stanford. I dove into subjects I had long been curious about but never had time to pursue. Philosophy, art history, even a creative writing class that helped me give shape to feelings I'd buried for years. I bought a secondhand guitar from a dusty music shop in Bend and taught myself chords through online videos. My hands were slow, clumsy at first, but eventually began to remember patterns. Patience and repetition brought rhythm back into my life. Mentally, the shift was profound. I realized those expensive suits and silk ties were more than clothing. They were a disguise, a uniform shaped by external expectations. I ditched them for well-worn jeans, flannel shirts, trail-scarred boots. I let my hair grow past its usual trim and allowed a beard to settle in. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was becoming. Then came the moment everything changed. It was a regular Thursday. I wandered into a bookshop in Bend I'd never noticed before. The place smelled like aged paper and fresh brewed coffee. Stacks of books towered toward the ceiling. Cats moved lazily between shelves like royalty. And behind the counter was a woman arranging hardcovers with the same care you'd expect from an artist framing their best work. Her name was Nora. She looked up, didn't offer a sales pitch. Instead, she said, "You strike me as someone who devours mysteries but secretly wishes he liked poetry." She wasn't far off. I'd always loved detective novels. Poetry, though? That was uncharted water. "Why do you say that?" I asked. "You're scanning titles like you're searching for something, but your eyes keep drifting toward shelves you think you don't belong on," she replied with a sly smile, handing me a slim volume of Robert Frost. "Try this. If it's not your thing, bring it back. I'll pretend this never happened." I bought the book, then read it cover to cover. Came back the next week for more suggestions. That turned into coffee. Long chats, gentle laughter, shared stories. I learned about her life. The shop was her post-divorce rebirth, a sanctuary she created after her insurance salesman ex left her for someone younger. Sounded painfully familiar, but she hadn't become bitter. She'd built something meaningful, something warm and inviting. The bookstore was more than a business. It was a refuge for readers, locals, and wanderers alike. Our connection was slow, honest, and grounded. No rush, no masks. We'd meet at a small diner known for the best apple pie in the state. She'd talk about eccentric customers and upcoming author events. I'd tell her about new market trends and trail discoveries. We weren't trying to win each other over. We were simply enjoying the presence of someone who listened, someone who saw the person beneath the stories. 6 months in, during one of our evening strolls along the Deschutes River, I decided to ask the question. The sky was ablaze with gold as the sun melted into the horizon. She was laughing at some anecdote I'd shared about my early tech struggles. That laugh, it lit something up inside me. "Nora," I said, pausing by the water, We're both old enough to know what we want and what we don't. Will you marry me? She didn't respond right away, just looked at me, seriously, weighing it all. Finally, she said, yes, but I'm keeping the bookshop. I wouldn't ask you to do anything else. I smiled. We got married the following Tuesday. No flowers, no crowd, no spectacle. Just a morning at the courthouse in Bend. Two people who had weathered storms and finally found shelter in each other. The judge was kind. Her eyes sparkled like she was seeing something rare. Maybe she was. 1 year later, we still start our mornings with coffee and Robert Frost, and we end them with apple pie and silence that doesn't need to be filled. Sophie came into our lives when she was 8, sharp as a tack, with deep brown curls and eyes that held too many stories for someone so small. Her biological parents had lost their rights due to addiction, and she'd spent 2 years drifting between foster placements. The caseworker told us the usual. Older children are tough to place, and Sophie had emotional baggage and behavioral difficulties. But that wasn't the whole truth. Sophie wasn't broken. She was afraid. And when kids are afraid, they act out. All they really need is a sense of safety, love they can count on, and a little routine. That's when the healing begins. That first week, it was rough. She tested every rule, questioned every gentle word, and waited for the moment we'd turn out to be like all the others. Just another letdown in a long list. But Nora had this incredible calm about her, a kind of quiet strength. And I surprised myself too. I found a tenderness in me I hadn't known I was capable of. We didn't rush it. Just one step at a time, one tiny breakthrough after the next. Then came the morning everything shifted. I was flipping pancakes, something I picked up during my months of living alone. Sophie was at the table, quietly poking at her plate, eyeing me like she was still deciding whether I was for real. I said gently, "You don't have to call me anything special. Marcus works. Or Mr. Run if that's easier." She didn't answer right away. Then she looked up, all serious and soft-spoken, and said, "Can I call you Dad?" No build-up, no dramatic moment, just a quiet choice. And from that moment we were a family by choice, not blood. And that was more than enough. Our life settled into a rhythm that felt like coming home. Sundays became our sacred pancake mornings. Sophie loved them with chocolate chips. Nora was a blueberry purist. I made both every time because making them happy had become the thing that made me happiest of all. Meeting Nora wasn't some fairy tale romance or grand cinematic moment. It was better. It was real. She was rearranging a display table of local authors the day I first stepped into her bookstore. She didn't even give me the usual customer service line. Instead, she glanced up, studied me, and said, "You look like a guy who reads thrillers but secretly enjoys a good love poem." She wasn't far off. Mysteries had always been my thing, but poetry? That was unfamiliar territory. "What makes you say that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The way you look through the shelves," she replied. "You're deliberate, like you know exactly what you're looking for. But your eyes keep straying to the places you think you shouldn't be caught browsing." Then she smiled and handed me a slim book by Robert Frost. "Give this a try. If you hate it, bring it back and I'll give you a full refund. No poetry talk ever again." I bought it. I didn't hate it. In fact, I loved it. I came back the next week for another recommendation. That led to a habit. Weekly visits turned into coffee dates that spilled into long afternoons, filled with deep conversations about running a small business, favorite hiking trails, and everything in between. There was something about the way Nora listened that made you feel seen, like your words had weight. She didn't look at you like a project or a checklist. She looked at you like a person, like someone worth knowing. She was 53, divorced for nearly a decade. Her ex was one of those midlife crisis guys who left for someone younger, thinking it would make him feel new again. Didn't. Nora could have become angry or jaded, but she did the opposite. She took the divorce settlement and poured it into her dream. A cozy little bookshop that doubled as a community hub. Book clubs, author nights, storytelling circles. It became a safe haven for readers and wanderers alike. She didn't just rebuild her life. She reimagined it. And I admired the hell out of her for that. We grew close like a well-tended portfolio, slow, steady, rooted in truth rather than sparkle. No games, no posturing, just two people showing up, day after day, ready to share a table and build something together. Lunches at our favorite diner became our thing, homey booths and the best apple pie you could find for miles. She'd talk about quirky customers and newly released novels, while I'd share my recent investment wins or trail discoveries. It was never about showing off. It was about connecting. We'd both been through enough to recognize what really mattered. And in each other, we found something we hadn't even known we were missing. We came through the fire bruised but better. 6 months after Nora handed me that first book of poems, I asked her to marry me. No over-the-top proposal, no hired flash mob or rented hot air balloon. Just the two of us on one of our usual evening strolls along the Dashuites River, where the sun melted into the water like gold leaf. She was laughing, something about the time I accidentally crashed my first stock trading account, and right then, I realized I wanted that laugh in my life forever. "Nora," I said, stopping by the water's edge. "I know we're both old enough to think twice, but what if we didn't? Will you marry me?" She didn't rush. Nora never did. She took her time, weighing it like she did every important decision. Clearly, thoughtfully, without any romantic fog clouding her view. Then she nodded once, firmly. "Yes," she said, "but the bookshop stays mine." That was never in question. I wouldn't have dreamed of asking her to give it up. We got married on an ordinary Tuesday morning at the courthouse in Bend. No bells, no bouquet toss, no champagne toast. Just two people who'd found love in the second act of life and decided to make it official. The judge, a white-haired woman with a gentle voice, looked like she'd presided over thousands of these moments. But she gave us a smile like we were the only ones that ever mattered. Maybe, for that minute, we were. 1 year later, we brought Sophie into our lives. She was 8 sharp as a tack, with a tangle of dark curls and eyes far too heavy for someone her age. Her biological parents had lost custody due to long-term drug issues, and Sophie had been shuffled through foster homes like luggage no one wanted to claim. The social worker gave us the standard warning. "Older kids are harder to place," she said. "Trust issues, behavioral problems. They weren't wrong about the trust, but they misunderstood the root of it." Sophie wasn't a problem. She was just scared. And scared kids test limits. They want to know how far they can push before you give up on them like everyone else already has. But Nora had patience that ran deep, and I discovered a tenderness in myself that had never had a chance to bloom before. We went slow, one day at a time. One step, one story, one bedtime routine at a time. The real turning point came in our second week together. I was flipping pancakes, something I'd gotten weirdly good at during my long, quiet months alone. And Sophie sat at the kitchen table, pushing her food around with her fork, watching me like she was waiting for me to slip up. I set a plate in front of her. "You don't have to call me anything special," I told her. "Marcus works. Or Mr. Run if that's more comfortable." She was quiet, thinking. Then she looked up at me with those thoughtful, serious eyes and said, "Can I call you Dad?" No dramatic pause. No music swelling in the background. Just that. Just a kid deciding to believe in someone again. From that day on, she was ours and we were hers. Life became beautiful in ways I never imagined. Pancakes every Sunday. Chocolate chip for Sophie. Blueberry for Nora. I made both. Making them happy had become the best part of my week. We built a rhythm. Nora's bookstore became the soul of our little town. Sophie found her place at school. And I found peace on quiet trails where the only sound was the wind whispering through pine trees. For 4 whole years, it felt like paradise. Then one morning, the past called. It was a Tuesday in spring. The sun was out. Sophie was digging some elaborate construction in the backyard sandbox. My personal cell was silent, as usual, but my business line rang. That number was sacred. Only 3 people had it: my lawyer, my accountant, and the guy who fixed my satellite internet. The caller ID said Linestam. I knew that voice before he even introduced himself. Flat, formal, lawyer speak for. "This is going to be unpleasant." "Marcus," he said, "we've got a situation." I sighed, watching Sophie build her castle wall. "They found me?" They've been trying to track you for months. But now they're pushing hard. Private detectives, old work contacts, even reaching out to people you haven't spoken to in years. They're combing through everything. I wasn't surprised. Honestly, I was shocked it took them this long to get desperate. What's the damage? It's serious, Lindstrom said, clearing his throat like he wished he didn't have to be the messenger. Your ex-wife, she's out of money. Completely. Flat broke. My stomach went cold. And that man she left you for? He continued. The one at your retirement party with the slick hair and cheap cologne. David Richardson. I remembered him like a bad taste. Leaning against my fence like he owned it, grinning while my life unraveled. Turns out he was running a full-blown scam operation, Lindstrom said. Romantic manipulation, fraudulent investment deals, stolen identities. Everything. And Denise? I asked, already knowing the answer. She gave him everything. Access to accounts, retirement funds, equity lines. He bled her dry. Of course he did. Of course he did. And now they wanted help. Or worse, now they needed me. But I had a new life now. A real one. A family that trusted me. A daughter who called me dad. A wife who built her dreams on solid ground. Not illusions. I looked out the window again. Sophie was placing tiny flags on her sand fortress, completely unaware that the ghosts I buried had begun to stir. I hadn't run from my past. I had rebuilt from it. But now it wanted back in. She'd emptied her accounts, lured in by a so-called guaranteed green energy investment opportunity, and vanished somewhere into South America without a trace. I should have felt vindicated hearing it all, like justice had finally done its job. But instead, all I felt was this dull, aching void. This woman had shared almost 3 decades of life with me. She was the mother of my children. And now she'd been taken in by a smooth-talking con artist like a rookie. How much did she lose? I asked quietly. All of it, Lindstrom said. Everything you left behind. The house is under foreclosure. And the kids. I braced myself. That's where it gets messy, eh? He let out a long breath. Tyler blew his entire trust fund on some garbage cryptocurrency. Nothing legit like Bitcoin or Ethereum. Something called Moon Rocket or Starblast. Whole thing imploded overnight. He's stuck in Peoria now, doing entry-level work at a small accounting firm, probably making around 60 grand a year. Drowning in debt. That stung. Tyler had always had a head for numbers. But book smarts don't always translate into real-world wisdom. And Camille. All 3 of her boutiques went under during COVID. She tried to take her business online, but she didn't understand the digital space. Burned through the last of her capital trying to compete with fast fashion giants. She's been crashing at friends' places since. So this was it. The people who once betrayed me, who stood by and watched everything unravel without lifting a finger, were now broke, lost, and trying to claw their way back into my life. What do they want? I asked, though I already knew. They're looking for you. They want to make amends. Rebuild the family. Tyler sent a letter to my office. Very emotional. Full of apologies. He says he's learned a lot and hopes you'll forgive him. Forgive him? I repeated bitterly. For what? Watching his mother cheat on me and staying silent? Treating me like a walking ATM for most of his adult life? Lindstrom said nothing. Outside the window, I watched Sophie excitedly show Nora her latest creation in the sandbox. A sprawling little castle complete with towers and winding tunnels. Nora knelt beside her, completely engrossed, laughing freely. That sound, that laughter, that was real. This was my family now. A girl who called me Dad, not because I paid for anything but because she wanted to, from her heart. And Nora, my partner, my equal, who chose me each day not for security or status, but because we made sense. We built something together. Should I send a reply? Lindstrom asked. I only thought for a moment. No, I said. But do me one favor. What's that? Send them a photo. Of what? My actual family. That night, after Sophie was asleep and Nora was curled next to me reading a mystery novel about stolen Renaissance paintings, I sat down at my writing desk. Not to type an email or shoot off a text. No, some things deserve permanence. I reached for my favorite pen and laid out thick paper in front of me. I started and stopped several times. Dear Denise and kids felt too formal. Hey guys was offensively casual. Eventually, I just started letting the words flow. The man you walked away from no longer exists, I began. Once those words hit the page, the rest followed naturally. You made your choice 4 years ago, when you handed me divorce papers on the night of my retirement. When you chose betrayal over honesty. When you picked a stranger over your husband, secrets over truth. And now you're facing the consequences of those decisions. I paused, looking toward the quiet woods behind our home. Somewhere out there, an owl called through the night. The faint sound of our stream bubbled like distant laughter. This is home now, I continued writing. And I've found peace here. I told them plainly that I wouldn't be returning to Chicago, that I wouldn't be rescuing anyone from their financial disasters, that the version of me they once relied on, Marcus Wren, family fixer, problem solver, had died the night they betrayed him. What came next was the hardest, but the most important part. I've learned some powerful lessons these past few years, like the difference between being needed and being genuinely loved. That blood ties mean nothing without trust. That starting over at 64 isn't something to mourn. It's something to celebrate. I wrote about my life now in broad strokes. Early morning hikes, late-night conversations, the joy of building something real with someone who never once asked me to prove my worth with a checkbook. I described what it felt like to be called Dad by someone who meant it, not just when it was convenient. I told them that the family I have now is built on honesty, not pretense, on mutual care, not silent transactions. I closed the letter with a truth I had come to understand deep in my bones. This love is real. This life is earned. And for the first time in decades, I'm living it for myself. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into an envelope, sealing it with quiet finality. Then I walked to the mantel. There was a photo from last month. The three of us, Sophie mid-laugh, sand still in her hair, Nora with one arm slung over my shoulder, her eyes bright with joy, and me smiling in a way I hadn't in years. That was the picture Lindstrom would send. Not as a threat, not as a taunt, but as a truth. This was the life they never asked about. This was the life I built when I stopped being their safety net and finally became my own man. They needed to see it, to really see it. Nora had asked a passing hiker to snap the photo during one of our weekend escapes to Crater Lake. In the picture, the three of us are standing before our log cabin with the towering peak of Mount Jefferson rising behind us. I'm dressed in a flannel shirt and well-worn hiking boots, my hair a bit longer and looser than it had been in years. Nora has her arm wrapped comfortably around my waist, her face lit up by that same smile that still catches me off guard. Sophie stands in front, beaming at the camera while hugging Jasper, our golden retriever we rescued from a shelter just 6 months before. It wasn't a polished or posed shot you'd see hanging in studio frames. No, it was raw and joyful. The kind of happiness that can't be faked. The kind that happens when you're exactly where you're meant to be with the people who make you whole. I looked younger than I had in decades, healthier too. The furrowed creases from stress that used to weigh down my face in Chicago had vanished, replaced with sun-kissed laugh lines from long treks through the forest. On the back of that photo, I wrote a single sentence. The Wren family chosen, not born. It had come to me during one of my early morning walks in the woods, and it encapsulated everything I'd come to believe. Family isn't biology. It's loyalty. It's love that shows up, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. I slipped the picture and a letter into an envelope, addressed it to Lindstrom's office, and gave him instructions to pass it along to all three of them. Let them see what real love and peace look like. Let them know I wasn't wasting away in some dusty corner of regret. I'd found something they couldn't take from me. Something that had no room for resentment, only clarity. The next morning, I drove into Bend and dropped it into the mailbox myself. As I watched the envelope slide into the slot, I was surprised by what I felt. Not vindication, not pain, not even closure, but quiet, grounded peace. I had let go. The reply came quicker than I thought. And when it came, it hit with the force of years' worth of suppressed sorrow and unraveling realizations. I was in my study, keeping an eye on some volatile tech stocks while sipping my second cup of coffee, when the phone rang. It was Lindstrom. The moment I heard his voice, I knew something heavy was coming. "Marcus, you need to hear this," he said, his tone unusually serious. "Your ex-wife has been calling non-stop. My assistant counted 34 voicemails. Just in the last 48 hours. She's leaving frantic messages, crying, begging, apologizing, saying how much she regrets everything, promising that if you came back, things would be different, that she never stopped loving you." I set my coffee down and leaned back in my chair. My chest felt tight, not with heartbreak, but with the ghost of something that used to be familiar. Denise had always cried when things spun out of her control. It had been her way of navigating problems, something I once mistook for vulnerability, but had later recognized as manipulation. I asked about Tyler. Lindstrom gave a tired laugh. "You won't believe this. He sent me a 10-page, handwritten letter, single-spaced. It's basically a full-blown confession and a plea for guidance. He admits he knew about the affair long before your retirement party. Says he didn't tell you because he didn't want to deal with the consequences. He's asking for your help now. Says he's buried in debt and wants you to mentor him." I shook my head, half in disbelief. The same son who once thought I was out of touch now wanted my help. My guidance. The one who dismissed everything I'd learned over a lifetime was suddenly drowning and reaching out for a life raft. Lindstrom continued. "He said that photo shook him. Said you looked more alive than he'd ever seen you. Said it made him realize you weren't the problem. That you weren't old, just wise. And that he never grew up. That one caught me off guard. Tyler had always been sharp, a natural with numbers, but clueless when it came to people. Maybe losing everything finally gave him perspective. Maybe the wreckage taught him the difference between knowing and understanding." Then came the real surprise. "Camille showed up," Lindstrom said. "She came to my office, in person, looked rough, like she hadn't slept properly in days. But she didn't come to argue or ask for money. She just wanted to see that photo again." "What did she say?" I asked. "She stared at it for nearly an hour," he replied. "Kept whispering, 'He looks free,' over and over. My secretary said she didn't say much else. Just kept staring." I walked to the window and looked outside. Sophie was in the yard, laughing while trying to teach Jasper some new trick with a hula hoop. Nora was in her garden, dressed in those oversized overalls she adored, humming some soft tune I couldn't place. That was my reality. That was freedom. Not a feeling, but a life you build with your own hands, day by day. I asked again, "Did Camille say anything else?" "She apologized," Lindstrom said. "To me, to my staff. Told my secretary she was sorry for the disruption. And she wanted me to tell you she finally gets it. That she understands why you left. And she said," he paused, "she said she's proud of you, for choosing joy over duty." I didn't say anything right away. I just watched the wind ripple through Nora's garden. Jasper barked, Sophie laughed, and somewhere in all of it, I finally knew the truth. I hadn't escaped my old life. I had outgrown. The chill I expected never came. Of all the reactions I might have braced myself for, pride wasn't one. Camille had always been the sharpest of my kids, but also the one most wrapped up in herself. So to hear that she could set her ego aside long enough to acknowledge what I had achieved, that was something I hadn't seen coming. According to Lindstrom, she's gone back to school. She's studying to become a counselor now. Says losing it all made her realize she'd rather give back than keep taking. She's even focused on working with youth from fractured families. I couldn't help but think of Sophie, the frightened little girl who became my daughter not by birth, but because I chose her. Maybe Camille was beginning to learn the same thing I did, that the most meaningful connections are those built on giving, not receiving. "You know what's odd?" Lindstrom said. "None of them asked me for your contact information. They're not trying to chase you down anymore. It's like that photo finally made it real for them, you're not returning. And now, for the first time, They're trying to piece their lives together instead of waiting for you to fix everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. It took a complete collapse for them to start growing up. Maybe that was a necessary part of the process. Outside, Sophie managed to guide Jasper through the hoop. She raised her arms in triumph, her laughter spilling in through the window like sunshine. That laugh wrapped itself around me with a gentle warmth, reminding me that this was where I belonged. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel smug or justified in their hardships. What I felt was unexpected. A quiet peace tinged with the hope that maybe, just maybe, they were finally becoming the people they were always meant to be. It's been 6 years since that blindsiding divorce stunt at my retirement party. I'm 68 now, sitting on my deck, sipping coffee while the sunrise transforms Mount Jefferson into a masterpiece of pink and gold. Behind me, Nora hums softly as she prepares breakfast. Sophie is upstairs getting ready for her final year of high school. Can you believe it? The child who called me dad by the second week is now a 17-year-old firecracker set to take on the world. Lindstrom, who's become more of a friend than a legal advisor, keeps me updated about my old life from time to time. And no, it's not the kind of storybook revenge arc where everyone gets what they deserve and wallows in misery. Real life is far more complicated. Denise is now living in a humble apartment in Evanston. She left that tiny studio in Cicero long ago. Nothing extravagant, just simple. She works as a receptionist at a dentist's office, of all things. Apparently, she's seeing someone. A widower who teaches and has a backyard where she started growing tomatoes. Lindstrom says she seems genuinely at peace in a way she never was back when she had it all. Strange how losing everything sometimes reveals what really matters. Tyler, surprisingly, landed on his feet. The accounting firm in Peoria suits him. He's structured, careful, and it seems like the financial collapse taught him something about humility. No more shortcuts, no flashy scams, just diligent, steady work. He even got married last year. Met a teacher at a coffee shop. They had a small wedding, nothing extravagant. Their first child is on the way. Sometimes I wonder if he'll make a better father than I was, or maybe just a different kind. Camille was the wild card. She earned her degree in counseling and now works with teens in the foster care system. All those years of self-absorption ended up giving her the insight to connect with kids who feel like the world's discarded them. She's good at it, has this knack for breaking through to the ones nobody else can reach. She never settled down romantically, but she seems deeply fulfilled in a way owning that boutique never could give her. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is watching someone realize they're capable of so much more than they believed. As for me, that's where the Betrayal story lies. Nora's bookstore dream, which I half-jokingly call her empire, has blossomed beyond anything we imagined. Bend was just the start. Now we've got locations in Portland and Eugene, each lovingly built and thoughtfully placed. She's become a recognizable name in the indie bookstore world, speaking at panels, mentoring new business owners. Watching her build something so impactful from nothing has been one of the great joys of my life. And Sophie? She got into Stanford. Partial academic scholarship, full financial coverage for her community work with animal rescues. The girl who once didn't know how to trust anyone is now the strong, driven young woman aiming to become a veterinarian. She still calls me dad, though it often comes with an eye roll whenever I get overprotective about her driving or dating. Just your usual fatherly fears. Summers are for lake trips now. About an hour north, there's this peaceful spot we found. I bought a small boat. Not a yacht or anything grand, just enough space for the three of us and Jasper to escape for weekends. Sophie's become a great sailor, and Nora has this almost magical ability to read the wind. We anchor in quiet little coves, reading, talking, or simply enjoying the silence that comes from being totally at ease with the ones you love. Our winters, cozy and slow. We huddle near the fireplace, drink Nora's unbeatable hot chocolate, and I watch Sophie attack her schoolwork with a tenacity that used to be reserved for profit margins and end-of-year numbers. The cabin has grown with us. We've added a sunroom where Nora plans store inventory, and I've converted a corner into a woodshop. Turns out I'm pretty handy with tools when I'm not behind a screen. People ask me sometimes if I think about going back to Chicago. about trying to mend those burned bridges, about reconnecting with the family I left behind. And it always catches me off guard, because it assumes that I'm somehow missing a piece of myself, that the life I've built out here is lacking without them. But I don't look back, not even a little, because this life, the one built from betrayal's rubble, wasn't forged from obligation or guilt or some hollow idea of familial loyalty. It was built from choice, from honesty, from love that shows up without condition, day after day, expecting nothing in return. And you know what? The most powerful revenge isn't about watching others suffer. It's about building something so beautiful, so deeply satisfying, that those people who once hurt you no longer have a place in your story. They become irrelevant. I'm living proof that you can start over at any age. And that sometimes, the best part of your story begins the moment you stop letting anyone else hold the pen.